So we're back with another full build now, and we've got this the Revell Armoured Scout Vehicle, P-204, which is also known as the Panhard 178 in German service. So it's like the Panzerspähwagen or something like that. 204 is the German designation, and we're going to be doing this one, German Grey, from Barbarossa. This is a rebox by Revell in 1/35 scale of the ICM Panhard 178, also known as the AMD armoured car, I believe. But it's all the same thing, and it's a kind of pre-war, an early period of the war French armoured car that was used during the Battle of France, captured by the Germans, reinstated in the German army and used in the war in the East, and also in some of the sort of occupying roles that they did as well in some of the Baltic states, Balkan states, back over in Normandy. They had them as rail cars as well, all sorts of things. So I'm just showing you here, when you put the floor panel on, there is a piece of plastic you need to put underneath, which is this ridge, and that creates the mount for the base of the steering wheel. So just so you know, it's very vague as to where that's meant to go. So that's what I'm showing there. And it's full interior, so you've got an engine, you've got the driving compartment, there's nothing missing. Yeah, so you've got the engine, you've got everything in there. It's basic, it's fine. Some of it's a bit soft in the detail. If you want to see how to upgrade that, Panzermeister 36 has done a great video on showing the upgrades he's put into this model. So that's a different way you can go about this. I just rolled with it as it is. It was an out-of-the-box build. For myself, really, linked in with a friend as well, where we were thinking of doing a Barbarossa build. But it was really an excuse for me just to get this one done for Barbarossa and for a French group build that we're doing in my local club. So it ticked a lot of boxes for me, and I'm glad to get it finished. And it's, for those of you who follow the channel, you'll know I am a great fan of Panzer Modelling Masterclass by Tony Greenland, and this is one of the models in the gallery at the back of that as well. And I'm trying slowly in my modelling life to build through that gallery and have one of them in my collection as well, because it's an important book for my armour modelling. So this is a nice one to get done for a number of reasons. So it's great when you can get a model together which ticks a load of boxes in one go. I was very pleased with this, and I do love everything German Grey, I must admit. I'm more and more and more, and I'm fascinated with the Eastern Front as well. So anything that fits into that, I'm all for. So it's great to have this. Now ICM have got a number of boxings, so if you're into the French version of this, there are an awful lot of different boxings covering all aspects of it. There's 2 turrets in this kit for a start to show the 2 different variants, so you'll be well catered for if that's something you want to be looking into. Now, I've already done a standalone video here, but I thought I'd put it in case people hadn't seen that. This is me using the acrylic paints from the War Paint range from the Army Painter. And this is me just building up the interior colours. So that's the colours I've used for that. It's their triad system where they've got a base, a mid and a high tones all through. So 3 different paints that complement each other, and that's what's used here for the interior. Not a lot of... Well, there was some good photos, but there wasn't a great deal of information other than you could see looking at the photos, the doors were painted the outside colour, or inside it was obviously like a white colour. So I've opted for an off-white using this method, using the 3 different colours here. It looks like in French service the doors were actually white, so when they open the doors, or sometimes it's the exterior colour. It looks like that wasn't the case in the French service, but it was the case in the German service during Barbarossa. That's mostly where these were used, on those long convoys across wide expanses across the steppes with dusty tracks. You tend to see sort of 10 of them in a row or with all kinds of other armoured cars, some German, some not German, and that's what I'm depicting here. Later on, I've got the other boxing of this, which has, I've got another one of these kits, which has the two marking schemes, and the other marking scheme is a 1944, so normal free tone camouflage, and I think that's back in the Western Front. And then I've got the Tamiya boxing as well, who've boxed the rail car version, which is also nice, and it comes with a nice bit of railway track as well if you depose it on. So that's one that I might be doing in the future, and that's just in all over Dunkelkelp. And it seems on looking into these Panhards, that's where they ended up after Russia. They were used as part of the sort of rail convoys, where you've also got those like armoured carriages. I don't know what you'd call them. They usually got like a Panzer turret on them or something. So it's very interesting for one funny little vehicle that the French made. So there we are. You find all these things out when you start building these models. So this is just showing you what you can actually, well, you're not even going to see this much. Once all the panels are in, you can't see very much. But I will admit, with all the doors open, I'm glad of having all that in there, because there is quite a lot on show. I've only decided to really upgrade a couple things, so I've changed the machine gun barrel out, and we'll see that later on. I would have loved to have had a metal barrel, but the only one I could find was from a German company, which is Mr. Models, I think it's called. And I've ordered stuff from them in the past, but I didn't want to put an order in just for this, because it was about sort of 17 or 18 euros for a little upgrade set, which came with a gun barrel, and I wasn't looking to get anything else at the time, so I did leave it as it was. Here, just to reiterate the video again, I have it linked to come up after this video if you want to see this in more detail. The armour paints are a little bit susceptible to some enamel washes, so I went back to acrylic washes. So you could use your Games Workshop type washes, Flory Models washes, which is a clay wash. Anything water-based is fine. You need to really have an overcoat, so a varnish, otherwise you get this peeling off of the paint, which some acrylics do, some don't. It's all about how the paint makeup is. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into them. You know, acrylics aren't always acrylics, and sometimes there's a bit of enamel in them one way or another, so all they can be affected. And these are one of those acrylics that are. So that's the Army Painter War Paint range. So once we've got all that sorted, it's the side panels going on now. I've glued them all on. I must admit, the underneath part, so all of the running gear, those suspension arms, was vague, to say the least. So to stop messing around, I just used super glue, fixed them, and made sure the wheels were level when they touched the ground. That was all I really cared about. I'm going to cover it in sort of dust deposits, so I wasn't really worried about what it looked like underneath there. As long as all four wheels were touching the ground, that was my that was the goal I was looking for, and that's what I achieved. So I was happy with that. But you do need to take a little bit of care. Use your kind of level surface, your straight ruler, and all of that to make sure you're all lined up. The plastic's a little bit soft as well, so something else to just bear in mind when you're using Tamiya Extra Thin. You don't need very much of it, and if you push it together, you'll get quite a lot of melted plastic oozing out. So it's better to just be gentle, like I'm doing there, rather than try and force it in, because you'll get it all splaying out along the joint. Vinyl tyres with this one. There you can just see a glimpse of the underside, and they do have a lot of seams sort of running around them. One of the seams is on the wall of the tyre, and then the other seams are in the tread of the tyre. They're a little bit more tricky, so I just did the best I could to cut some of them off with some sharp side cutters. And if you do have seams on vinyl tyres, the best way I've found is just to go on in with a wide, soft sanding sponge like this. And what that will do is mould to the shape of the tyre, but it will take the height of the seam down. And you need to work kind of fast. It's more on the amount of friction you're getting from the speed than the actual sanding sponge sanding it, if that makes sense. You're kind of using the friction to rub the seam off of the wheel. That's kind of how I look at it. And you can see just going in with those side cutters there, just to take out some of the high points. And it's again more sort of pulling and ripping and tearing rather than cutting, because it's a funny medium. It doesn't really cut, it doesn't really sand. But if you do this sort of thing, it tends to work okay. We're just changing out the gun barrel here as well, using some Albion alloys. So this is the machine gun barrel, and this is one of those simple straight barrels sticking out of a plastic housing. So I've drilled the hole there, and then I noticed in my reference that actually there's kind of like it's not like that, it's like a larger recessed sort of punch hole that the barrel comes out of. So I thought I'd have a go at replicating that. And the best way I could go about it was just drilling out a shallow, wider hole using that original hole to centre it. And then that original hole is what will then take the piece of metal barrel from Albion Alloys, and you'll have that kind of recessed effect. I don't have the picture to hand. I was using sort of odd pictures I had in some of my books on German armour, and also anything I could get off the internet. But that gives you the idea. You can see there's kind of now a wider recessed hole, I guess. That seems to be more or less what it looks like in the pictures. Now another issue with this kit is just the way they've moulded it. You've got these two upright pieces here, and the detail's very soft. There's meant to be a row of 5 bolt heads or rivet heads on there, so replicating those with some 50mm rod, 0.50mm rod, sorry, obviously, and just cutting off a few bits. Now, in the past, I've thought about getting a punch and die set, is it? But I decided to go down this route. For the amount of times I need to actually punch out rivets, I just couldn't make a whatever it is, £90 punch and rivet set viable. And I kind of needed 2 as well, because I needed the round one and the hex one. So I just buy rod, because you can buy hex rod and round rod, cut it out like this, and if it's too thick, once this is all dry, sort of in a couple days, I just sand over that a little bit, just to knock it back a bit, round them over. And I must admit, I forgot I even did this, so it's really not noticeable on the finished model. I forgot, and then when I look, I can't even really see it on the finished model, so it works fine. And we've done a bit of cast texture as well there, looking at some reference material, and also Panzermeister's video mentioned it, so I looked a bit closely and you could see it. I was surprised. This is like a cast section that goes into the turret there. So I've used Mr. Surfacer to replicate that, and we're ready for paint. Now, this was near the build up to Telford, and I was just getting painting done when I could because I was very busy with other things, not modelling related. So this got painted and deckled off camera. That is Mr. Surfacer Black 1500, straight on, with MRP Panzer Grey over the top. That's it. Deckled straight onto that, and then it's been kind of matted down here with leaving a little bit of a sheen. The decals are fine. There was quite a bit of carrier film in the middle, but it was okay. I had a right fiasco with that big cross on the front that I did myself. It didn't need to happen. I decided to try and cut out the carrier film inside the cross after putting it on the model. You can imagine how that ended up. Then I had to sand it all to get rid of the marks I'd left. And mask it and respray it with Mr. Surfacer and then MRP, and I don't know how I got away with it, but I did. But there we are. I think I mentioned it in an update video. I've got a bit of a base here that I'm reusing because, again, this was getting ready for the show, Scale Model World IPMS Nationals at Telford, because we were putting our group build up on the branch. So that's what I wanted to get ready. Now I'm going to pose these doors open, and there's some windows at the front, and I haven't put the tyres on because of how fragile the wheel hubs are. I got one chance to put those tyres on. They're really stiff. The vinyl's stiff. The mounting around where the wheel hubs are is a bit questionable, so I thought, right, well, I'm going to get all this weathered up, and I've got one chance to push those wheels on, and we'll go like that. So this is standard weathering techniques for me now these days, where I'm using these enamel products. So we've got Dry Step. I'm using that as my initial colour. Think of this like an enamel wash. My hand does get in the way a bit here. I apologise, but you'll see what's going on. So with this Dry Step, I basically go all over the area where there's going to be quite a lot of dust. Now, what I also don't show, but I did do, is I use very finned Tamiya buff from the XF range. Now, you can do that first, or you can do it at the end, or you can do it in the middle, or whatever, but using that as a sort of light dust coat as well, that just ties everything together. Now, I opted to do it at the end. And again, this is plastering on mud, but that is not what we end up doing. I've got neat thinners there now. So where I've put on the colour that I want it, now I go on with the thinners to try and knock it back a little bit and move it around and thin it down and let it wash around some of the bolt heads and rivet heads. And just make sure it's not kind of clumpy. Because what I'm actually using this enamel for is to hold some pigment. So we've got Europe Earth, and then that pigment now gets knocked into this wet enamel, and that will help bind the pigment and give a more of a 3D effect for the dust. When it's all dry, that's what happens. I'm only doing one side here for the purposes of demonstration, but I would do this all over in one go. I wouldn't just do one side. But for me, it's so cack-handed with a camera in front of you. It's the least I can do and get away with it while showing you what's happening, the better for me. So that process has now gone on all over. And now again, I'm going back in with these neat thinners. And what I'm doing is just knocking back any of this colour that is holding up in a place where I don't want it to be. So I initially douse the thinner on it to loosen it, and then I work it back in to more of a natural area. This is just where the brush is caught, or it's got hit somewhere, it's where I've got colour that I don't want it to be. And I'm working in sections, but what we do is carry this dust all up over the vehicle. And if you want to know whether this is right or wrong, just look at any German grey vehicle from the Barbarossa campaign. They are completely dust covered all the way up through, inside, outside, from the roof down to the wheels. And it's part of the effect. It's part of the appeal even. German grey with light dust over it. It's just something about it. very high contrast, so it works. It looks great. It works well, and it's one of my favourite ways to model armour. And you can see now I'm going in with a bit more finesse. So where we got just blocks of colour, I've now worked that back using these neat thinners. And where I've got any dry sort of pigment that doesn't look like it's soaked up, I'm going in now with neat thinners just to let that soak through with capillary action, and then we get out of there, we leave it, and we let it dry off naturally. If you want to speed it up, you can use a hairdryer. If you want to work a bit faster, from the hairdryer, it's more about the heat than the air. So you don't need to be blasting it. It's more about warming those enamels, and then they tend to gas off a bit quicker. So there you can see we've got our ruined model. That's it, it's all over. What do we do now? It's completely ruined. Well, no, now we go in with the finesse. So your big wide brush, you're now knocking back that dried enamel and pigment mix to give you the effect that we've done all of this for. And this is now where the finesse comes in, because we just knock it back till we start to see what we want the effect of the dust to be. You can do this another way as well. You can actually do this with the hairspray technique, but it's not something I've ever tried to do, but that is another way of doing it, to get this effect of it being worn back as if it's dry dust and it's had a bit of rain on it and then it's dried off again, that kind of feeling. Or if there's been oil or fuel stains or anything like that. And we're using that dark base coat just to come through again. And this around the front where this WH1 is, this is really showing you what's happening. This is happening all over the vehicle, but this is the best way to show it, because it's quite prominent. That's the effect you're after, a really pleasing effect. It's very natural looking. It's bang on with the photography that I'm looking at, the reference. And we just use that as we go around. We do it on the back as well. I'm assured as well, although this is a very, very dark colour, that it's a good representation of Panzer grey, Dunkelgrau, whichever you want to call it, the old famous grey that the German tanks are in. Often depicted as blue or lighter colours with lots of modulation. That's absolutely fine, it's another way to go. But as far as accuracy, this seems to be pretty much the colour it was. So we've got the wheels on now, tyres on, sorry, like I said, and again, now these vinyl tyres, there's less is more with the enamel products, because I think if you think about what the makeup is, if there's vinyl, sort of rubber and plastics and all of that, there's the same makeup that's in enamel products in the sort of lineage, and if you go too heavy on them, you can start to get problems. You can start to get the actual tyre breaking down a little bit if you go too heavy and you're too rough. So less is more in that regard. And as you can see now, we're starting to go in with a bit more of a finessed approach, placing the dust effects where we want them. So we're wetting the tyre with enamel thinners, and then using an enamel product to run around that fluid to give the desired effect when it dries. And then we're taking that on around the rest of the vehicle. We are approaching the end sort of point now as well, where we want to get, this is really to try and get that streaking effect around those rivet heads. You can already see it there just under the cross there on the hull. Sort of 5 rivets across it. There's nice fading down. Pretty much there for this one. I didn't want to go too far. Now you could go further and further and further with this, and like I said, at this point, this is where it would be good now just to come up with that Tamiya buff, really, really light, sort of, you know, almost 90% thinners, maybe even a bit higher, and just let that just slowly warm it up. And that is what I've done. Come the end in the photos, that has been done, and it will just bring. It's almost like a filter, I guess. What you're doing is just bringing the dust effects up to, and the Panzer grade down to, a kind of area in the middle where they meet. One last thing is the wood effects. Now this is XF60, Tamiya dark yellow, and then just a dark brown. You could use oil, you could use what I've used here is like track wash, and then we've got a very stiff brush there. We'll just kind of scrape it from side to side, and that'll leave some like streaks, which to the eye, you know it's wood, you think it's meant to be wood, and you sort of see it as wood. And it's a nice subtle effect. It's an easy way to do it, which is what we're always about, you know, when you want to build a model like this, which is really just a project, I don't know, like a mojo builder. It's an enjoyable project. You don't want to get too bogged down in the minutiae of everything. And there we are with the base. So now it's just kind of tying things into it, as in tying the model into the base. And for that, I'm just doing a few splashes with the dry step products from Armour. So there we are. That brings us to a close. So we've got some photos coming up. I've taken a figure from the Tamiya 38T and plonked them in the top, and I think it makes all the difference. So I was really pleased with this model. It's sort of exactly what I had in my mind's eye when I started the project. I'm very happy with it. I would like to explore this a little bit further as we go down the line with the German grey, see how much we can push it, and try and incorporate some of the Panzer modelling masterclass models that are from the gallery as well, try and get some of them built up as we go on forward. So fingers crossed you'll be seeing some of that in the next few videos. So as always, thanks for the support, thanks for watching, thanks for everyone who's commenting on the videos, it's much appreciated, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.